This is the Convergence.
When you really research how much is lost in transmission, you would not even, but if you could just figure out a way to capture the energy that's lost in transmission, that's why decentralized energy is where it's at. Solar panels on your roof are way more efficient.
Big time.
Because you don't have to lose all that transmission.
Exactly. And so I think, through that gamification, allowing entrepreneurs with a system, again, you don't need to sell anything and you don't have any barrier of entry. It's permissionless. If you own the equipment and you can go get some electricity and you can hook it up to a satellite internet, you're mining. You're adding security. That's really what a miner does. You're, yes, adding transactions to the block, but because you are one of many, you're ultimately hiding in numbers. You're creating this very high barrier, which a nefarious actor would have to overcome.
Yeah. And
so when you get all these actors throughout the world looking for the cheapest energy, the excess energy, and they can go anywhere because they don't need to be necessarily in this.
Well, that's why, 51% of Bitcoin right now is mined off the grid. It's not,
right.
It's mined by, completely, to your point, methane gas from farms, natural gas burn off, solar, wind. It is really fascinating to see how that happens because nobody wants to pay the power company to do this because it does take energy out of the grid. They don't want to spend that money. So instead, they're finding innovative ways to either reduce the way that transactions work in the use of energy or to find a substitute. And these are entrepreneurs, which I think for the first time, to your point, and I had never really thought about this, but we're now talking about being able to bring all these entrepreneurial minds into an equation to try to solve a problem where the payoff is immediate. Most entrepreneurship, the payoff is 5-10 years down the road. When entrepreneurship gaining efficiencies in the mining of these materials, and we'll call them materials, gaining efficiency means immediate impact and immediate benefits to them. So the world that you and I lived in, that where we earned our gray hair, where you had to go and fall on your face a bunch of times and lose a bunch of money, that comes to the end a little, come to its end a little bit here because you can immediately.
And as someone who's looked into some large scale mining operations, I've yet to set one up, but I've projected one.
I have a miner that I'm going to bring on the show. Actually, awesome. I've been chatting with him. I'm going out to meet him in Pittsburgh next week.
They have one of the most steady base loads of consumption around. Imagine being a large consuming client to an energy producer, say like SRP.
Yeah,
I can tell them exactly how much I'm going to consume 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365.
So no surge, and surge is what the worst part is in the energy industry.
That's the biggest problem.
The surge is the killer.
And we're having a surge. We need you to shut down. No problem. Turn it off. And then I can go back to work an hour later.
That's why power companies will pay you to put a smart thermostat in. That's why they'll do these things, because surge is so bad for them. And the way that energy works, and we'll have to get an energy expert on here to talk about this, but you've got to maintain a baseline load all the time, even if you need it or not. So to your point about a lot is lost in transmission, yes, it's true. They're also producing energy that they have no intention of ever using, but it has to be there in case everybody turns on their washing machine at the same time.
So how about have this community of people who will take it no matter what,
all
day long, and then you turn it off. And I like to use this other example to describe miners, and I think it helps put in perspective for people. Think of a Bitcoin miner or a decentralized blockchain proof of work miner like a security guard. And you could walk to any nightclub in town and just walk in and start working, and you get paid. You don't want to work right now? Leave. Go home. Go sleep. You want to go back to work? Walk into any other nightclub. It's literally, that's what you're doing. You're a security guard who has you don't need permission to go to work, and you get paid the moment you turn on.
That's interesting.
It's such it's a phenomenon. I think it's a truly incredible industry for people to start to dig into, because it is a way to, yes, of course you need expensive equipment. You got to go get your baton. You got to get your bulletproof vest if you're going to be a big security guard.
Yeah.
Then you can go to work every day. And you can do that for year after year after year without anyone's permission. You don't have a boss. No one can tell you to quit.
Yeah.
It's a powerful idea.
It is a powerful idea. And I think it does change the way. I think this is what, I've written a couple of articles on this, and one recently called Peak Manpower. And we used to talk about, back in my energy days, peak oil, and how there becomes a point where the cost to extract exceeds the cost to extract any more than we can easily. It becomes so excessive that it doesn't make sense. So you get this bell curve, right? Where you finally reach this point where you're like, okay, this is the max extraction of gallons per day or barrels per day that we can get out. It's only going to go down from there. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we've reached that point with human manpower as well. We were in this labor market where people were cheap, and you didn't have to treat them very well. And even though we always talked about, third world countries and slave labor, we never looked downstairs at our own places and said, my people are on food stamps. They work full time and they're still on food stamps. But this changes that. And I think so many CEOs right now are frustrated as to why aren't people coming back to work? Where are the people at? And I've talked to so many people that are like, I have changed to a gig working, mentality. They're like, I rent out my spare room on Airbnb. I drive Uber on the weekends. Right. I mine Bitcoin. I trade. I do all of these things. And I'm like, yeah, but don't you have a job? And they're like, no, I don't have a job. And I think that brings in a bigger bioethics conversation as well, or just an ethics conversation about things like healthcare. I was always a big fan of, well, go get your own healthcare. After COVID, now I'm like, I really want to make sure that you don't have COVID if you're hanging out with me. So it would be nice if you had access to a regular doctor. But think about how something like healthcare would totally radically upend and change our working society. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a reason that some big corporations may be against that, because they recognize if people could go get healthcare on the street, they wouldn't need to come to work anymore.
The best healthcare, right? Exactly.
So I do think there's a lot to this, right? There's a lot to where this can go. So we've talked about centralized, which is a network that's controlled by you. You choose and hire the security guards. And then we've talked about decentralized, where anybody can come into that. Where do you see? And I know we talked a little bit about implementations that IP Assets has done, and we talked about Diamond Ancestry, and it's such a cool one. DiamondAncestry.com. You just go check it out. It like when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, now I see it. What are other applications? I know you've just done some trading cards, right?
Yeah. So we formed our own brand, athleteassets.com. And this is actually, when they talk about being an entrepreneur, right place, right time, we're planting seeds. So when I went to the University of Arizona initially for IP Assets, initial thesis about intellectual property, and they turned me down or just didn't get it. And year after year after year, I go back. Eventually they said, hey, we've got this new thing for student athletes called NIL, so that they can monetize their name, image, and likeness.
Sure.
Now they're getting asked by all these student athletes who they never had to work with before for copyright images, access to trademarks and logos. And all of a sudden, this massive influx of licensing needs showed up at their front door. And so because I was already involved in the NFT space.
And you were an athlete at U of A too, right? You were a swimmer, right?
I was a swimmer at the university. So I had some great contacts in both the athletics realm as well as the tech launch, technology transfer realm. But basically what we did is we got the first commercial licensing agreement with the university to license any copyright image owned by the university. So say the football player catching in-game football taken by a faculty member of the university that's owned by the Arizona Board of Regents. We are able to license that image, then also license the official trademarks and logos to create a product for the student athlete. So specifically, our license is to create NIL NFTs, more or less. So we are able to mass produce unique content. So every player basically has his own individualized trading card because the pictures are all different.
Sure.
It's him catching, maybe it's just him posing, a lot of different pictures. And because we're able to do it at a very high rate and at a very low cost, we're able to do this for every single student athlete at the university. And so
wow.
So not just the football players, not just the superstars.
Yeah, so you bring equity to the whole entire system.
Kids who will make $10 off of NIL will probably make it working with us because we're the only one who can give them a product and an opportunity to actually do that. Whereas a lot of other people are chasing things like hats and shirts.
So I want to talk with you for a few moments about Evergreen Carbon Credits, one of the sponsors of this show. I started working with Evergreen when I was telling a friend of mine who's involved with that company about my efforts to try to learn more about blockchain, NFTs, crypto, all the things in this space. And he showed me Evergreen. Evergreen was a really unique solution. I've looked at carbon credits in the past. I've been in the sustainability industry for almost 15 years. I understood what they were. You were buying an offset to offset the carbon footprint that you or your company has. But I also understood the challenges with that. They're sold in very, very large blocks, and then people break those blocks up and try to sell individual credits or small clusters of credits to businesses. And that creates some room for for fraud, for people to not be up and up on what that project is, if that carbon credit is real. And there's, challenges with that. And you can Google it right now and find there's a big case in Europe going on about fraudulent carbon credits. But what Evergreen did, I thought, was really unique. They took this idea of NFTs and they took blocks of carbon credits and broke those things down into tens of thousands or even millions of individual carbon credits. They can actually fraction those even out to a tenth of a carbon credit if they needed to. And they were able to then create a smart contract around that carbon credit so that you can track it back to its origin. You can find out what project it was associated with, but you are also guaranteed that the carbon credits you're getting from Evergreen are the real deal. You get that certificate, you get that certification that only the blockchain can do. So that's why it made sense for them to come on as a sponsor of this show. We're talking about all this new technology, and with new technology comes higher energy usages in some senses. And Evergreen is here to help offset that. If you want to look to maybe improve your image in the marketplace, maybe you're looking to offset some of your carbon footprint, not even just for your image, but actually for the sake of the planet, head on over to evergreencarboncredits.com and check out what they do. You can buy credits for as little as $11, and you'll get the certificate and the NFT that you can put in your wallet that shows that you've actually made that contribution. And that money, particularly right now with the projects they're working on, is going to reforestation in the Amazon. I think that's something we can all really get behind, particularly when we understand that the environment, the climate we're all connected to it. It doesn't matter if we're putting off emissions here in the US or if it's happening in Mexico. It all contributes to the same global problem. So why not be part of a global solution with Evergreen carbon credits? It's been an issue even thinking back, I grew up in a really small town in central Pennsylvania. My high school, though, was sort of notorious for putting out NFL players. I mean, we put out a lot of NFL players. But when these guys were in college, they didn't even get picked up by the big universities. They got picked up by the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and they just happened to get drafted out of that system because they were exceptional. But those folks in those systems are never going to get looked at in this NCAA licensing deal, right? There's just no way. But there's small town community of 10 or 15,000 people. Every person in that town, G. Roy Simon is a good friend of mine who is one of the greatest football players of all times in the CFL, Canadian Football League. Yeah. I mean, he has more rings. The guy has so many rings, it's like he can't even walk half the time. But amazing football player, not very well known in the US, very well known in certain areas of Canada. And of course, my hometown of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, everybody idolizes G. Roy. If he would have had an opportunity in college to capitalize on that, and then people would have been able to see that those trading cards actually increased in value and they were a limited number of them, I could absolutely see how there could be an entire business model around that for small town colleges.
Totally. I mean, people don't know. I mean, Cooper Kupp went to Eastern Washington. Like, I would have loved to have made Cooper Kupp an Eastern Washington trading card, and then he became who he became.
Well, to your point about equity, I think you're so right. Your point about equity is it does happen a lot in the college systems too. Look, I have friends that are scouts in the NFL, and what games are they going to? They're not going to Breezewood, Pennsylvania, to watch a high school or a small Shippensburg college. They're not. They have a great football program. They can't go there. But some of those kids do make it up through. They show up and they play, or their stats are just so great that somebody somewhere goes, wait a second, who is this guy? And they look at the film and they find him. But I just think it brings equity to that as well. And I think it helps also for female athletes being able to participate at the same level as male athletes.
Absolutely. It's for us with Athlete Assets, it's all about equality, inclusion, equal opportunities for everybody. If you're an NCAA athlete, you should have the opportunity. You already busted your ass to be here.
Yeah.
What we can do is give you a fair opportunity to monetize your name, image, and likeness.
Well, I could even see like Special Olympics doing this as a fundraiser.
That'd be great.
Who would not buy those NFTs? I would buy them. Right. Yeah. I don't write checks regularly to Special Olympics, but that would be something that I would say, hey, look, I'm going to participate. I want to do this because I think it'll be, and not only is it benefiting the organization, but that individual child that is able to see, dude, 25 people bought my, like, you would feel like a baller for that. And that's the kind of things absolutely. I think we can do here.
It's a great feeling. And I love that we've been able to do it the way we've done it. and it's working. And that's super important to our business to show that, it is scalable. We can do 30 football players in a couple weeks, no problem, for pennies on the dollar. And they're loving it. They're also learning. They're learning about blockchain. They're getting wallets.
It's true.
They're starting to learn some of that jargon. They're learning business things. They've started to ask questions like, indirectly, what are the cost of goods sold? They don't even know what cost of goods sold is, technically, but they're like deducting this logic. And I think that's super cool and something that we've really enjoyed talking about with the university, that this is not just a quick money grab. These kids are actually learning something and they're vested in it. Therefore, they're actually learning it.
And think about it too. And for the most case, most of these are being paid in Ethereum. So it's going into a wallet. Now, traditionally you would, the blockchain contract's going to figure out their royalty percentage, right? And put it in their account. So traditionally mom or dad would take that and put it into a savings account, earning 0.00000. But now all of a sudden you're buying an asset that historically increases in value. You could leave those in there for 5-10 years and you never know. I mean, it could be now all of a sudden you made $500,000 off of your high school image.
We take the approach even where, and our customers love this, we accept dollars, debit card, credit card. We do not require these NFTs to be bought on chain.
That seems to be that's
trend. A very high barrier of entry that a lot of people who want these cards, they want to start experiencing it. They don't want to have to get a MetaMask wallet, get Ethereum, send it to their wallet, sign the DeFi contract.
I had the exact same thing happen with me the first time I tried to buy an NFT. By the time I had watched all the YouTube videos, the collection was sold out.
And that's why I believe that type of style, that type of industry will see a massive fall off in terms of value, because right now it's really held by a small community of people who know how to access it. But when the larger community can access it, I think they're going to see through the frivolity of it and say, this is stupid. This is a JPEG. Why did I buy this for $100,000? Yeah. It's stupid.
I agree.
They sell for a lot less, 10 to 15. We sold one the most for $3,500. But to me, that's like a true, that's actually a collectible. That's within a real realm of
I use Jay Pierce as a great example. Artist that I collect, I've been collecting him for years, just did his first NFT collection a few weeks ago, I guess 2 months ago now. Wildly successful, sold out immediately. Nice. I mean, changed his life, absolutely changed his life, because for years it was slugging away, putting all this stuff in the back of your car, traveling around. Now all of a sudden his visibility is very, very high, but he's also a real artist.
Right.
I think going on to Fiverr, you can go on to Fiverr right now. I'm going to do it, and let's just see what happens. If I want somebody to make me an NFT collection, I bet you for $50 I can get one. Let me just say,
when you make an NFT collection, what you really need is just a graphic designer. How you put that on the blockchain can be done in a lot of different ways. Ethereum will cost you hundreds of dollars. On our blockchain, the one that we build on, costs you 25 cents. And then ongoing costs, we're talking less than a penny a year to hold it. So it's NFTs, in at least the world that we build on, are incredibly cheap. But the hard part is the art. It's the actual artistic.
Here's a great one. Somebody will get me 10 billion NFTs for $1,100. For $1,100, they'll produce me.
I'll give you those 10 billion for $1,000. I can do it for you this afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's where I do believe there's. I don't want to say it's not fraud. It's capitalism in the system, right? Where people are just trying to capitalize on a trend. But the real value of these things is not in Jack Dorsey's first tweet. No. It's in the actual, traditional art. It's the certificates of authenticity. It's, I see artists starting to couple NFTs with their collections now. So they have that digital record. Maybe it's a video of the item being created or a little GIF. I mean, that is something that's very cool, and I think collectors would like.
Yeah, like about 2 years ago, we did a project for I put that in the chat here for an artist named Rick DeMont. So he does physical, tangible, one of a kind watercolor paintings. And we token.
Oh yeah, it's the one we did the scooter on, right?
Right, exactly.
Rick DeMont,
that artwork, and then we made an NFT from the NFT that represents the scooter that has the artwork on the scooter, and so you can create a much more complex network of assets that aren't the same but are connected. So it's copyright. You take that plain image behind you, and you wanted to make shirts with it. That artist could issue you licensing rights, and you could make assets from it that are also NFTs, and everything can be connected, trail all the way back.
And my understanding is he could issue me 100, the ability to do 100.
Right. Yep.
Right. I mean, that's the coolest part about it is this has always been this audit trail in licensing. And I've worked in licensing before. It's always the scary part because you have to trust that the guy on the other end is only going to produce the number that you told. I was involved with a company, this was just 4 or 5 years ago, that was outsourcing their product to be made in China. They had very, very specific designs. Mm-hmm. They went to pitch Walmart and Walmart was like, no, we already carry that product. And found that their manufacturer on the back end was skimming about $9 million a year in unlicensed products that had their brand on it that they weren't getting the royalty on. And what can you do now? The company doesn't have the cash.
Nope.
You know, they're in another country. But that's the beauty. And I think when the supply chain, when a Walmart or a Target starts to require a certificate of authenticity through that process, or Amazon will be the first. Mm-hmm. There's more fake stuff on Amazon than there is real. Trust me.
Oh yeah.
And having that NFT from the manufacturer would be pretty good. And nobody's going to generate one of those if they're not authenticating.
Now, here's another thing when it comes to those certificates of authenticity. And this is why a lot of people get scammed on OpenSea. Ethereum, those smart contracts, it's not a fixed namespace. So like I could make an NFT and title it the same thing. The only way you could tell that it's different than the authentic is to look at the hex code. And so that is a massive problem. And you see people getting defrauded all the time because they don't know how to even audit, is this the original NFT from this address, which is the known address of the artist, perhaps.
Is there any sort of centralized of that yet where people can authenticate an NFT on your behalf? Because I can see that being something that people need.
You can do it manually, and I'm sure there's services I just don't even know about to look through the hex code. So that's really what it is how did the contract, when was it minted, who was it minted by? But you can mint the identical thing, and it's just the only difference is the hex code.
Wouldn't have the hex code. And I had never even thought about that. I mean, I just assumed that when I look at OpenSea that OpenSea has done some level of verification there. They're just a marketplace.
I mean, I don't know, bash OpenSea here. They're pioneers in the space, of course, but I've read articles where 90% of all trading on OpenSea is done by 10% of accounts. And that a lot of the correlation between price and creation has everything to do with the previous price it was bought at, nothing to do with artistic merit, aesthetics, has nothing to do with who the artist is. It's just this kind of fake money laundering, straw buying.
Well, okay, so let's dig into that one for a second, because I posted something before I knew anything about NFTs, and I posted it, and I don't know if you commented. I know a couple of people commented on it. Were like, "Dude, let me buy you a beer because you don't understand how this is going." But I was like, I got an idea. I'm going to make an NFT. I'm going to put it on a platform and sell it for $1 million. I'm going to get, so I'll have to pay. I'm going to buy it myself for $1 million in Ethereum. Yep. And now I have the NFT and I have the money, and then I could sell it to somebody else. And they were like, you don't understand gas. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What is gas? I didn't understand that whole process. So how does that work? You mentioned before about miners getting paid. How do they get paid? They get paid with gas, right?
Right. Yeah. So at the end
how
of
does that work?
When all Bitcoin is mined, there's still transaction costs. You still have to pay a fee in the form of the native currency to issue a transaction to the blockchain. Okay. That's just how it works.
Right. So when I create a blockchain contract, I have to pay for that.
Right, exactly. So when you submit a smart contract to the blockchain, you've paid a fee. Okay. Usually that's thousands of dollars worth of Ethereum to submit a smart contract, like make your own token. That would cost a lot. And then when you send a token, there's a gas fee, and then that gas fee is basically based on network congestion in a lot of ways. Now, if you were to sell a $1 million NFT, the gas fees to move that NFT would be tiny, a drop in the bucket compared to the $1 million you just got. So you saw recently Melania Trump got caught making an NFT, and then she bought it herself, or bought it the same wallet bought it for like $270,000. You're basically able to make your own price floor.
Sure.
And because it's not very clear that it's Derek Maines, people who aren't doing research, who are just what do you call them, your pipe investors?
Yeah, right.
They're just buying. They're not doing research. They're not digging into any of this stuff. And then they bought crap that was artificially pumped up by either the owner or
the author themselves.
It's actually a network of a lot of people.
Yeah. But wouldn't they have had to, I mean, they're essentially market makers and the stock market, but wouldn't they had to have paid the fee initially to get a blockchain contract?
Right. Yeah. So you pay a fee initially to create a smart contract. Correct.
I see. And what does that fee usually look like? I mean, how much is that?
It depends kind of on the data. That's
okay.
How complex is this contract that you're trying to have? It's like code. Smart contract's like a code.
Got
it's
it.
Got to run on this EVM, Ethereum virtual machine,
okay.
and there's a cost to that because there's only so much Ethereum virtual machine space.
Yeah.
And so then proof of stake, that's going to, all that other stuff, it's going to supposedly resolve that. But to me, we have not yet hit the point where we need to find the new horizon. We are still figuring out how to do the basic part of it, the decentralized, permissionless, distributed, fair launch. Like, how do we make this incredible technology without knowing that this one group of people has all the incentive, whether it's control or not, incentive. And the reason why I think that's a problem is that people act very differently when they're given something versus when they earn it.
Adam, thank you. Let me just ask one more thing. Let's spend 1 minute on. I see you have a Raven Coin shirt on. What is Raven Coin?
Raven Coin is the blockchain that we build on primarily.
Okay.
It's a fair launch, proof of work, no pre-mine, no ICO, no founders rewards. It's basically the Bitcoin ethos, but has on-chain digital asset tools. So to me, it's the best platform to make digital assets and NFTs because it's the one with its capabilities.
Yeah. So ipassets.com, is that your website?
ipassets.technology.
Technology. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. I think this is going to be 2 episodes because I can't believe we went 70 plus minutes. But
call me back anytime. You know where I live.
I'd love to have you on again. And I'm excited too on this June 2nd event too, to have you at that. And I'll get you a little bit more detail on that as we come closer. But hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Convergence, where we talk about everything Web 3.0 and sustainability. And we talked about all of it here today with Adam Small. So Adam, thanks again for being here, and we'll keep in touch and have you on again.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.